This is Chewing the Gristle. And Chewing the Gristle is a wonderful poetry chat. Our poet today is from New Jersey. She's a Jersey girl. The poet today is Annmarie Lockhart. Welcome, Anne.
Hello, gentlemen. It is great to be with my two favorite South Carolina gentlemen and representing Jersey on your show.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Anne.
Annmarie Lockhart is the founding editor of Vox Poetica, an online poetry salon, and the press, Unbound Content, an independent press devoted to publishing poetry. A resident of Englewood, New Jersey, she lives, works, and writes 2 miles east of the hospital where she was born. You can find her words in fine journals, online, and in print. How would you describe your poetry beginnings? Was it something you found at a young age? And who were your mentors when you first began writing poetry?
It's a good question, and I love when writers answer it because the roots for so many of us are in the same place. And it's like we can't really remember a time when we didn't write. You know, I remember writing as a child from the time I could read. And then the poetry piece, specifically in high school, I remember a phase. And that was encouraged and cultivated by I had some amazing English teachers in high school, Beverly Jones and Mr. John S. Hessen, and they were these great people who worked in my small town and exposed me to the world. And at the time, most of my influences weren't actually poets, but they were Hemingway and they were Steinbeck. And so they were poetic, you know, and that made an imprint on me. But I stepped away from poetry for decades, for maybe 2 decades. And I didn't really begin writing seriously until I was probably in my mid to late 30s that I started again. In my 40s, that's where I really started in depth. And at that point, it was kind of in the air for me, but what really started to happen was it was engaging with other living poets that really influenced my development.
Of those poets, who are you looking at and talking with?
I am blessed to have contact with writer groups, both formal and informal, in Northern Virginia, Southern, Western Virginia, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and other people around the world even that are maybe not part of a formal community, but that become this virtual network. So what I have in that space are people who know me at this point, who are open to getting to know each other and who share their work across these groups and spaces. At live events, we get together whenever we can, which is a lot harder now. But in the virtual world, which the virtual landscape has been completely instrumental to me. When I started meeting people poetically, it was virtual, you know, and I had writer friends in Arkansas and Michigan and California and Texas and Virginia and South Carolina, and we could be in that space together, Florida, wherever. But I was home with my kids freelancing, and I wasn't getting to anywhere, you know. But I could be there virtually, and then over time, those contacts grew and became more dimensional, and people started to share in their spaces. So I've been to Alaska, you know, with poetry, and how do you describe the way that impacts what you write? You know, every time I go someplace, I write something about the experience, not exactly as a discipline per se, although I should incorporate it into my discipline, but as a way to capture a moment or part of that experience in a space I couldn't otherwise describe it.
Sister Anne, tell us a little bit about your process for writing a poem. And I know that's a really general question, but I'd love the specifics of how a writer or a poet goes about writing. So tell us a little bit about that.
I love that too. And I think that's one of the things that people who are starting out need to know more about, because it helps you to figure out how to do it when you hear about how other people do it. So for me, there's a few different ways I like to work. I love to work in prompted space. I love to work off a set of prompts, 1 prompt, 3 prompts, whatever it may be, an image, another person's poem. There's a great thing called getsparked.org. And it's a prompted space where it takes she takes visual pieces and written pieces and musical pieces, and people partner up and they share. They share an inspiration piece and a response, and then it all gets posted. And it's fantastic for anyone who's looking for a reason to write, some direction for writing. It's a set group of prompts. So prompts are always amazing. You go to spaces when you work in prompted context that you might not otherwise find a way to. So an image will speak to me in a way that I don't have a voice for or had no story for until I saw it. And then that story appears and then I can access it, but I couldn't before I had the image. Or someone's poem begins and then I can write responsively to it, either in conversation or on a tangent. You never know when you get into a prompt where it's going to take you, but it will guaranteed always take you someplace. Even if it's, I can't do shit with this prompt, I got to start over. And sometimes those end up being the best ones too. Like it's all fair in a prompt. Everything is fair. So that's great space to play in. Outside of that, I guess everything in a way is a prompt, but sometimes something will occur to you. Sometimes something smacks you across the head. Sometimes, I have a piece about, there's a park here that I like to kind of sums up for me the world that I live in northern New Jersey. And as I've done walking there over the years, lines of poetry about that space have appeared to me. And then that poem has revealed itself over a matter of weeks or months, things like that.
Hey, Ann, do you want to read that poem?
I can read that one. I'd
love to hear that.
It's one, so I will read it to you. I'm going to pull it up here, but I also want to say, as it occurred to me, and it was an unraveling. The poem itself was an unraveling evolution. It started as a line and an idea, and what it did was it evolved for me as an exploration of who I am in my world and what that world looks like. And it ends up also in some ways being a 9/11 poem, which I didn't intend for it to be when I wrote it, but sometimes that happens. It's called Landfills, and it appeared at Peacock Journal, which is an online, lovely, lovely publication. I would highly recommend it. It's edited by Bill Lantry and his lovely wife, Kate, and it's wonderful. Landfills. There is a park in the elbow of the New Jersey Turnpike with a standard running track tucked inside a figure-8 bike path and more tennis courts, basketball hoops, baseball diamonds, and soccer fields than I can count. There are kayaks, horses, and a band shell, and 2 different areas for carnivals, ethnic festivals, and exhibits like the semi-permanent dinosaurs and the moving mini wall. There is a memorial to those who died on 9/11. I like the monotony of counting laps on the small track, but today I take the 5-mile trek around the figure-8, across the bisecting street, along I-95, past the view of the western side of the Palisades, named for the sheer cliffs of its eastern face, not its western slope, and the tallest buildings in New York. I walk, then jog, but it hurts, this body, this view. I see the new monstrosity that casts a mile-long shadow over Central Park. It is this era's most hated building, like the Twin Towers before it, and for the same reasons: too big, too ugly, too plain, too boring. This park was built on a landfill, and its little hills are not with me yet, or mostly I am not with them, and I should have counted quarter-mile laps instead, but I love this path at the edge of a swamp. None of this was here when I was growing up. There was just the highway with trash in the crook of its arm and those buildings everyone loved to hate looming over the world. Overpeck Creek is beautiful now, clean, stocked, blue. Fishermen and birders love its bounty. New York was built on a landfill too, undergirded by bedrock, supporting skyscrapers instead of pathways. Over the eastern landfill, a city soars. Over the western one, herons and kites. Whether the base is swamp or bedrock, rebuilding over a landfill is not only possible, but possibly preferable to laying a new foundation on virgin land. Layers of life, strata of compressed days reborn, newborn, stretched out and inched up, taller and more fertile. It hurts this body, this view, to see what is no longer here, crumbled, cleared down to the bedrock, life upon life, dust back to dust, atoms smashed in stardust, settled over the detritus of hundreds of years. I know, a whisper of time in ancient tongues, but the longest history we allow in the new world. I worry a mountain of tasks, laundry to wash, dry, fold, sort, put away, scrap, or save, carpet to pull back, floors to refinish, children to fledge, words to write, miles to walk, run, endure. I am patient. I'm impatient. I want my world rebuilt tomorrow. But building in life or on landfills doesn't work like that. Sediment settles, muck congeals. My lungs and legs will not align. My heart beats erratic and arrhythmic. Tick, tock, tock, tick, tick, skip, hop. It hurts, this body, this view. Pain is a seamed edge against regrown skin, a reminder of ghosts, lives laid down among food scraps and old newspapers, broken glasses and empty gin bottles, books with missing pages, faded photos, unmatched socks, and rebar, always rebar. It takes a long time to build a city, a park, a place where herons, kites, words fly, and memory percolates through rock, silt, and soil. Particulate dreams waft into morning coffee. Vapor-borne toasts float to the heights of the open-eared clouds. Runoff remembrances remind me, this is just a place built and rebuilt upon itself in the crook of the elbow of I-95, over a cliff face and across a river, occupying both sides of the Palisades, salvaged and scavenged from landfills.
That's a remarkable poem. That image, open-eared clouds, what a vivid image.
And the clouds are there, and the buildings are there, and you're on this landfill, and that one is one too. And it's this, amazing thing when you think about what we build and where we do it. And that doesn't change too much everywhere. It's kind of the same wherever you go,
This may be a hard question, maybe an easy question, but how would you describe your poetry?
I think oftentimes it's an exploration, and it starts in one place and it ends up in another, and sometimes it comes right back on itself. So I think, like all poetry, all writing, it's a conversation. It's a secret or an unraveling, or it's something I can't figure out. It's a voice from the past, or a call to the future. It's so many things. And I don't always know when I started what of those things it may be. But I do like to explore a certain area over and over and over again, the apple is a big thing with me. And I like to talk about where I live. Jersey pops up in my writing everywhere. It's in my voice, it's in my hair, it's in my words. And so that's something that becomes contextual, subtextual, not necessarily always overt. 9/11 has come up in my work way more often than I ever expected it to. I never set out to write about it, but yet I have many, many times, and I'm sure I will again. Things and experiences find their way, make themselves heard in what I write.
Before I turn it over back to Al for a question, how about read us one more poem?
Sure. Let me see here if I have one that works well after that one.
Your apple poem would be cool.
Well, I have some apple poems, but I'm trying to think of which ones I sent you. And I have some others that aren't as where they're a little more, the apples are a little more hidden, but here is one now that I think works well with that. And it's not actually the apple or the other. It's actually forthcoming at Sensations magazine. It's called Fishkill. It's a little bit of a geography piece, but it's also a little bit of what we're experiencing now as planet ecologically. Fishkill. Kill means stream, and it's a place. But still, you'd think it referred to what's happening on the Hudson, miles away from the tributary at Fishkill. What's happening in the Hudson is a kill, mostly of Atlantic menhaden, a species susceptible to the toxic combination of heat and drought that robs the river of oxygen. The fish don't fry, instead they die from hypoxia or anoxia, suffocating in summer and piling up on the banks of the mighty Hudson. We think of it as clean now, the Hudson, or cleaner at least than it was in the 70s. It recently won the title, most nutrient-rich estuary on Earth. But that, like kill, doesn't always mean what you think. Sewage and runoff feed phytoplankton and breed algae blooms. And who eats algae? Oysters. But the oysters are gone, homeless since the death of the reefs that once housed them. And so the algae grows, and the oxygen goes, and the fish die. On the river that is bigger than a kill, but has spawned the biggest kill of fish you've ever seen, suffocated in summer many miles southwest of Fishkill. That happens in that poem, which I like. By day, I'm a medical editor, and I work in a lot of clinical language, and a lot of times that finds its way into my writing too. And like it did in that one, in tone and some terminology, and that I kind of like the space of playing in clinical language or tone, as well as real artistic flowery stuff too. Mixing them is fun for me.
So as you write, different people approach it a different way. When it comes to revision, how do you go about your revision, and when do you know that a poem is finished?
Okay, sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes and sometimes, rarely for me, but sometimes, man, a first draft is it. It's finished. It's there. It appeared to you kind of in whole, like Aphrodite from the sea, and you're good. But most of the time, it's a line here, a word there, and you just go in a direction, and you just I say get it out, just write it, and then leave it, come back to it. And then what'll happen is you'll either have bursts of those types of inspirations that will help you to create it, or you have to carve away a lot. You'll chip away and chisel away until you find that there's a melody to the poem, or there's a story, there's a structure buried beneath the story you thought you were telling, and that's the one you really need to reveal. So editing is necessary. It's vital. Without it, you have a lot of words, but you have very little direction. And so, and oftentimes the hardest part about editing is that one line, those 5 words you loved so much that brought you here in the first place have got to go, because they're not part of it really. They just started you off. So I have a folder, I have a page, I have a file that's maybe 200 pages, scraps of notes, lines that I think I may use one day. And sometimes you go back to those, and you do. Sometimes you have no idea what to write. So you go back to you pull up one of those lines you loved so much, and you start a poem with it. Or you pull up 6 of those lines you loved so much, and you see if they work, and you throw them together in a stew. And editing is as much a creative exercise as it is a surgical one, I think. And if we approach it from that angle, it's a lot less onerous. No one wants to edit. It sucks. But if you can kind of play with it, it's just as much fun as the initial write that got you there.
You talked about your virtual community. You have a community here and there and there. Do you have a community in and around where you live that is your poetry community?
I do. I am actually hooked up with some Jersey writers, and the poem that I just read will be published at Sensations magazine, and that's edited by David Messinio, and he's been doing this for a long time. And it's a storied magazine. It's got years of wonderful collections. And so a lot of the way his magazine works is it's a collective in essence. It becomes a community. So he does events around the publication of the journal, and readings, and those things are gatherings that occur every 2 months or so in a normal year. this not being a normal year, we'll get back to that. But so yeah, there are a group of people that I see regularly here in New Jersey, and we share our work. It's not a workshop group, although it has provided that experience. There have been times when we've read in a room together, and I've thought about things. I've shared things that are not complete yet for me, that I want to read. I want to feel them out in a space, and then I come away with it with some sense for how I want it to go next. So it's a supportive group of people who have known each other for a long time. I think I'm a newcomer to the group, and I've been there for a few years. So they've been around a while. People come and go like any group of artists. You get people coming in, people going out. It's a constant evolution, but it's good. It's good to have people in your space where you can. Yes.
What would you like to share with us next?
I'm going to read a funny one. It's a little touching, but it's also funny. And it's about an experience that I had maybe 2 summers ago, not far off from now. And it's the inspiration for the collection that I've been working on, that I don't know yet whether it's going to be a book or just a series of things that I present together. I'm not really sure yet. But it's called Ancestrycom. It tells a story. Ancestry.com. On a Saturday in June of 2018, while a mechanic fixed the tire, I watched France deliver Diego Maradona's shame, bouncing Argentina from the World Cup. My daughter texted me with breathless news. "I found your cousin." I replied, "Katie, I'm watching the World Cup. This ancestry shit is your thing. Soccer is mine." "Mom, he was adopted." "Adopted in or out?" "Out." She now had half my attention as I wondered who in the family had given up a child. "He's your father's cousin, your first cousin once removed. His name is Bernard. I'm sending you a photo." 10 seconds later, I stopped watching Paul Pogba and Kylian Mbappe own La Selección and stared instead at a face I recognized deep within my bones while tears fell upon the cracked glass of my phone. So that is a thing that really happened. And in the moment of my irritation being taken away from my game, I, had a whole world of family and people I hadn't even known were real opened up to me. And in the time since, Caitlin and I have gone to visit that cousin and his wife and one of his sons, and we've met, and that same side of the family, we've met other Lockharts in Ireland. We have met one of them in real life, and another one, 2 or 3 now virtually. So that's become this whole amazing experience and creative, huge creative inspiration. So much you can do as you start to get to know people, and this moment of recognition of somebody you didn't even know was in the world, but when you see the face, you instantly identify that as yours. That person is yours. You have them in your DNA. It's remarkable.
Wonderful. Tim.
Well, Ann, were you going to read one more for us, and then I'll ask you my question.
Okay, I can read one more. It's another one that came out of the experience of getting to know my cousin Bernard. Now, he had been adopted. He had been, his parents were my great uncle and his girlfriend, and they were not married. And Ireland back in the day, you couldn't do that. So they had put him in one of those terrible orphanages. And he was very fortunate to be adopted out of that, to live this amazing life as an artist and a professor, and to be in the space where he could meet us later and then tell us the story and then talk about how that experience has influenced his art. He's an amazing painter. And we could talk about things that, we all need to talk about. And this poem is a kind of a distillation of that. It's called Please Use the Good China. 1. The seam that stitches me together is silver. The Japanese call it kintsugi, creating art from broken pieces. I am spit from a people taught to hide their chipped porcelain. 2. Given the choice, I'd have preferred to inherit my mother's legs, but instead I've gotten her scar, this vertical bisection where my abs used to be. Hers originated from the causes of a different era and blossomed from repeated use, each delivery. I don't think it ever bothered her, at least she never said so. 3, do you feel that? Sharp or dull? Yes, I feel it, and oh, it's sharp. The doctor asked 3 times. Then the baby can't wait. The incision was the last thing I felt where my edges opened. Ever since, where tingles or prickles might once have played, there is nothing. If I run my fingers along the scar, it feels like I'm touching someone else's body. When the epidural didn't work quickly enough, they clapped a mask over my face and told me to breathe. I wasn't supposed to remember any of it. The only thing I've forgotten is whether or not I screamed. 4, I do not love the art of my seamed body. At first, I avoided looking at it. I've hidden it from lovers and my children. But one day I saw a vase with curves to match mine, pieced together down the center with gold lacquer, and I understood that I wear a stitched lifeline. 5, the man that raised me was a relief map of seams, painted the colors of every metal ground into glue. When I was 16, I helped mix the platinum pigment of his heart scar. It was even and clean, and it gleamed for the rest of his life. He was living artwork fit for a museum. 6, in Ireland in the 20th century, an estimated 35,000 unwed mothers were told they didn't deserve to raise their babies. Imagine if a nun had taken them to a museum instead, taught them to mix gold and silver into lacquer, told them the most precious art is always the best used.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's my favorite.
Let me ask you a question, and I'll turn this over to Brother Al, but for the emerging poet, what advice can you give them about working through mediocrity, working through rejection, and even working through success?
So, what the key word in what you just said is working. Through all of it, the working. That's the one continuous thing that has, if that doesn't happen, none of the rest of it matters or will happen. So working is key to it all. And I would also say this, approach something and then reapproach it again. Trust your voice. You will know when something feels right. Outside of the success of being published here or there or anyway, whether you're published or not, many writers are not. They're still writers. Trust your voice. I write on one of the things I write about in different ways is an assault experience that I had, other variants on the theme of assault, but I struggled with that for a long time. And what I ended up with were essentially two pieces that were published at the same time that were different approaches I took to the subject at different times. And one was an earlier approach that I liked, but didn't feel it captured enough of it. It captured one facet of my experience there. And so when I reapproached it again from a different perspective, and that one felt much more complete to me. But together they work and they give you a snapshot of that experience as I processed it over time, which is valuable to me as a writer and as a human. It's valuable to other people who see it and read it and incorporate some of their experiences. So approach things over and over again. If something speaks to you once and it never speaks to you again, cool. But if it comes back and there's something that you want to do that you feel you haven't captured and you don't even know what it is yet, try it again. Read a poem and think about how what you're trying to write might fit into a construct like that. Sometimes it's as simple as a different construct, either a format poem or a different word entry into it. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Do you want to talk about what happened or how you felt? Do you want to talk about what angle of a bigger piece of a story do you want to tell? Try them all. Try them as many times over. There is no failure. If you hate it, you can hate it. It's okay to hate it. It's okay for other people to hate it, because it's not for that. It doesn't live for that. But where it matters most is that it will ultimately find a way to become a story you need to tell. That story has value in and of itself. Let it find its way.
So as you write and work on your craft, what resources do you have? Do you have a specific book or books that you have referred to or read in the past that you would recommend for an emerging writer?
Okay, so I would say this: the craft books. There are so many. Find ones you like and play with them. But and go to workshops or talk to people who said, "Hey, I had this great exercise." Ask people what helped them write things that they liked. But the other thing, and this is part of just like living in your world. So I recently stole the time to reread A Handmaid's Tale. After I watched the series, I had read it in the 80s and loved it always, but watched it and then I thought I have to reread it again. And then, Margaret Atwood wrote the sequel. So I needed to reread the original before I read the sequel. And what struck me, the very first page when I opened the book again, that I hadn't realized the first time, what struck me was the beauty of her language, just the poetic writing Margaret Atwood is a master of. And when I read it this time, I really let myself kind of swim in that. I just wanted to embrace it, to experience it. And I think that experience finds its way into your writing. And you should, one of the things you should always do if you want to write, wash yourself in other people's words. The people whose writing you love, just live in it, swim in it, spend time in it. Just, read it before you fall asleep and let those images, words, and sounds be the thing that lull you off. And it'll help you to find a natural way to interact with language and image.
Hey, Anne, before I get you to read maybe two last poems, is there anything else you would like to tell our listeners?
The thing that has mattered most to me. So one of the things that I like when I'm looking at other people's work, I listen for voice. Voice is so important. Find your voice. Be true to your voice. Don't ever try to use somebody else's. Use your language, whatever it is. And even if it's not language, words you would use in a conversation, your voice is your voice. Find it, trust it, use it. It's the strongest thing that leaps out. When I read a poem, it's the thing that I hear most. It's my indication whether this is authentic or not. So voice matters. The other thing, don't get bogged down in fact versus truth. Fact is great. If you're writing a biography, by all means, live in that space. If you're telling a story, truth matters way more than fact. So don't lose yourself in those details. You're not writing this as part of a testimony for a court case, hopefully. So don't live there. Tell the story, the truth of the story, and use metaphor. Use an alteration of a date. Leave the date out. Mix up the chronology if need be, but tell the story that needs to be told. That matters way more than anything else. Truth is the most important. The authenticity of writing is in voice and truth.
Well, please bless us a little bit more with the authenticity of your truth and your voice.
Okay, I have one. So I would like to read one of the assault ones, and it is unfortunately a little bit long. It's not so long, but the reason why I would like to read this one now is it is all voice and it is all authenticity. This is. When I approached this subject, the first several times I did it, it was highly metaphoric, and then something just didn't feel right, and I took the technique of writing with numbers, and I decided to just record everything I remembered about the event and everything I could recount.
No, you honor us by reading this poem. I know which poem you're going to read. That's wonderful.
So it's called F50, Revisiting One's Attempted Rape at 18. And it was published at a great place called Anti-Heroin Chic, which is, I think at the moment, not accepting anything new, but still exists for everything it housed prior. Number 1, believe this is happening. Number 2, beat on his chest, though your hands are small and he is a champion wrestler and he is too high to feel it anyway. Number 3, don't wonder what he means by, I've fucked uglier girls than you, until long after it's over. 4, Scream and curse. Let your voice do what your hands can't. 5. After he leaves, unfinished and unrepentant, huddle with your roommate, shake, but do not cry. 6. Call your mother. 7. Observe and remember that the gut never lies. 8. Listen to the police tell you about the law. 9. Listen to the police ask you about penetration. 10. Blush with shame for failing to consummate the crime. 11. Tell everyone you're fine. 12. Tell the nice boy with the same name that you didn't say it was him. 13. Don't throw up when the RA reads you his apology, in which he calls you a dumb bitch. 14. Don't you dare throw up when the RA tells you about the knife you didn't know he had. 15. Walk into your first college class. 16. Write off your first college semester. 17. Listen when your roommate tells you about the hearing you weren't invited to, at which it was learned that his records were destroyed and he is free to go elsewhere, free to try again. 18. Listen when your roommate tells you about the up-campus senior she is dating. 19. Listen when your roommate tells you about the gun he held to her head. 20. Flee, marry, divorce, flee, marry, separate, deliver daughters into the world. 21. Pray that Mary intercedes on your behalf. 22. Read until you're able to write again. This will take 2 decades. 23. Starve yourself. 24. Recognize your story in a TV news report one night while cooking for children. 25. Learn to say assault. 26. Gorge yourself. 27. Google his name. Feel halfway vindicated upon discovering he never won another championship. 28. Wonder if he's done it again. 29. Wonder if you'll ever understand appetite. 30. Intercede on your own behalf. 31. Breathe. 32. Write.
That's amazing.
Felt
Powerful
complete
point.
to me. That one felt like it was the way I needed to tell the story. And so it wasn't the first time I tried it. And editing really mattered there because I had a list 100 numbers long. And so that's where editing really made a difference. I was able to distill it and it's complete. And I felt the second it was done, that one I totally knew. I knew it.
Do you have one more
Yes.
that you'd like to read?
I have a short one, and this one is, it's funny. It's not, it's sad, it's funny. It's a little funny little thing, and it started as a piece of microfiction, but I liked it better as a poem. And it's called A Gift for Tad, April 30th, 1865. He said there would be no presents now. But he's just a boy, the saddest of boys. There must be this one perfect present. It was time for her laudanum, but she continued folding the paper, tucking the corners, cutting the ribbon, tying the bow. Her secretary spoke. Such pretty paper, Mrs. Lincoln, but what's inside? Sunshine, she said. He must unwrap it slowly. The warmth will soothe him, but it will be the feel of the ribbon slipping, the paper lifting. That's what he will remember. He must know the unwrapping is always the best part. And I think that's kind of appropriate for us at any moment in time. And it's with writing. The unwrapping is always the best part.
That was a wonderful little piece. And when you think of the Lincoln family, it's for him to accomplish what he accomplished is with that family and with everything they went through is a miracle. We, Tim and I, want to thank you for giving us your time and your poetry and your wisdom. And we encourage folks to write, to listen to folks who write, and to look online for things that Annmarie does. There's a wonderful online poetry salon called Vox Poetica. Look it up. We want to thank you, Anne, for being Anne and for being on Chewing the Gristle.
Thank you guys so much for having me. You have my heart. You know how much I love you guys. I miss you so much. This is a great experience for me to just see your faces and hear your voices, and I cannot wait to be back in your space. Everybody, listen to Chewing the Gristle every single week. It's a great show. It's amazing what these two guys can get writers to talk about and use that as inspiration to write. And Vox Poetica is experiencing a website upgrade. Soon it will be back in new, but everything is there from the old, so you can go find it. Right. Thank you guys so much.